Hi, everybody. This is Silvio Canto in Dallas, Texas on Sunday, March the 22nd. And welcome to our commentary. Well, I'm going to get to an American Thinker post that I wrote about Cuba in a minute, but I just have a feeling, it's just a feeling based on what I'm hearing, that something is going to happen with Iran in the next 24, 48 hours. That come Tuesday night, we're going to be having a different conversation about Iran than we're having right now. President Trump has issued a threat. He's not the kind of man who issues threats for no reason. All of this, of course, has to do with the Straits of Hormuz. So I'm just simply saying, I just feel that something big is going to happen here. I don't know what, but it's going to be huge and could be very consequential and could be very deadly for Iran as well. So we'll see. But President Trump is threatening Iran. And again, he's not the kind of man who says these things without meaning them. If he says, you've got 48 hours to do something, you better do it, because there will be consequences. So we will follow it and see exactly what's coming. But something big is going to come. I'm pretty sure of that. Well, before I get any further, though, I do want to say that this is the end of March. I think this is our last Sunday in March, actually. But the weather around here doesn't feel like March at all. The weather around here feels more like Memorial Day. We've had some pretty hot temperatures here in North Texas. And I heard that somewhere in North Texas today got to 100 degrees. I don't know where, but it was hot. It was very hot. So Memorial Day type weather is what we're having here on what is the last Sunday of March. You know what they say about Texas. The weather is always very unpredictable. All right. Well, I have a post over at the American Thinker today talking about Cuba and something we've seen before, where these socialists take these trips to Cuba. They're leftist socialists. They take these trips to Cuba. And my article is entitled Socialists to the Rescue. And that's what this is. A bunch of people going down to Cuba, basically to give credibility to the line that the reason the lights don't work is because of the embargo and all the garbage that we always hear. And what's interesting here is that these people who are going down are staying in hotels where they have air conditioning, they have lights. But the Cuban people that they're supposed to be helping do not have air conditioning and they do not have lights. And as soon as these people leave, they stay in Cuba and these people come back to the United States. But, this whole argument about the embargo, as I point out in my post, the embargo only applies to the United States. But there's a lot of other countries in the world, China, all of the European countries, Mexico, Brazil, Canada, South Korea, lots of countries, Australia, New Zealand, Japan, Taiwan. Those are all major economies that are not forbidden to do business with Cuba, but they don't do business with Cuba. It has nothing to do with the embargo. The problem is, as I point out in my article, is that the Cuban government, their economic policies, that is, have destroyed the market economy in Cuba. So what are the Chinese going to sell Cuba? Cubans are not going to drive their cars. What are the Europeans going to sell Cuba? They're not going to buy Italian shoes or whatever the Europeans are exporting. So you have this situation where it's become very fashionable for the left to blame the embargo for Cuba's problems. It's not the embargo, folks. It's the economic system. The failure of communism is the reason that this country that in 1959 had one of the highest per capita incomes in the third world, a country that was really very prosperous for a third world country, now is, dealing with these power outages and having all these problems. But you're always going to have, as I point out in my article, these socialists are always going to go to the rescue, and they go down to criticize the United States. That's all they do. They go down to criticize the United States and give credence to this terrible lie that the terrible embargo is responsible for Cuba's problems. No, it's not. Not the embargo. It's not the embargo. The embargo is not the reason the country's a mess. It's communism. It's socialism. That's what the problem is. Well, Governor Hochul of New York, you may have heard that she, at a press conference or an interview, basically said that she wants New Yorkers to come back. She wants New Yorkers to come back and pay taxes in New York. New York, of course, has lost a lot of taxpayers. They've moved to a lot of other places, not just Florida, but South Carolina, Ohio, lots of places. Some have come to Texas, but not as many as have probably gone to Florida. And these people are now being told, hey, come back. You know, we miss you. I'm sorry that you decided to leave. Of course, she's not proposing any changes to the reasons that these people left. She's not proposing any tax changes or anything that will make New York more attractive for business. But she is proposing something very interesting, and that is that she wants to update the so-called climate change law. And I think she's starting to realize, as many politicians in New York are starting to realize, that this climate change law that they passed a couple of years ago, first of all, they're not going to reach their targets because the targets are so ridiculous, they're not going to reach them. Number two, it drives a lot of business outside of New York. They go to Virginia, they go to West Virginia, they go to South Carolina, they go to Texas, okay, where you can operate. You know, you can be responsible for the environment, but you're not tying the hands of business people and turning everything they do into a lawsuit, which is what New York has done. So she's sort of coming down on that too. She's saying, you know, we're going to have to revise that climate change law that we passed because it's not realistic. We're not going to meet the targets, and maybe we have to, you know, we got to change that so that make it easier for people to come back. You know, I don't know if they're ever going to come back, honestly, because many of these people have left New York and they're now quite successful in Florida, in Texas, and other places. I understand many have gone to South Carolina. And, you know, they go to these states, not only is the quality of life better, but just the overall business climate is better. So you end up with, you know, you're doing business in a state where they actually appreciate the fact that you are profitable and they're not trying to punish you for being profitable. So I don't know if these businesses or taxpayers are going to come back. My hunch is that they're not, because there's no change in policy. There's no change in policy. I mean, what are they going to go back to? The same overregulated and overtaxed state of New York that they left in the first place? So, no, not going to work. Not going to work. But I appreciate the fact that the governor is under a lot of pressure to make some things happen because her state is not functioning at all. I mean, New York, California, Illinois, these are states that are losing taxpayers, and they're all losing taxpayers for the same reason. You know, same reason: overtaxation and over-regulation. Well, let me take you back to this day in 1963. I guess that would make it 63 years ago today. The Beatles released their first album. Now, this album was released in the UK. It was called Please Please Me, and it was, you know, the follow-up to their big number one song, Please Please Me. And, you know, this was a huge success in the UK. Please Please Me. Then the next single that came in June or July was She Loves You. And that was a huge number one in the UK and in many other parts of Europe. But here's the funny thing. That album, nor those singles that I mentioned, Please Please Me or She Loves You, none of that made it in the United States. In fact, you can go to YouTube and there's a clip of the American Bandstand, you know, for those of you who used to watch American Bandstand with Dick Clark, where they are reviewing She Loves You. And, you know, the kids were like, well, you know, I don't know, this doesn't sound good to me. Well, of course, all of that changed in early 64 when the Beatles came to the Ed Sullivan Show. And then, of course, we know what happened. They became the number one band in the United States and in the world. But their first album was released 63 years ago today, and nothing happened in the United States. Not a single album, or I shouldn't say not a single album, but not many albums were sold in the United States, and those songs were never played on the radio. So the Beatles didn't make it here until much later when they were invited on the Ed Sullivan Show. And then at that point, the big song they were promoting was I Want to Hold Your Hand, and that took off to number one. And you know the rest of the story. They became huge after that. So the Beatles, their first album, 63 years ago today. I guess you can get that on Amazon. You should be able to get the British copy of that album. There is an American version of that album that came out later. Actually, there's two. There's one called Introducing the Beatles, and then there's another one called The Early Beatles. Those two basically are the ones that have all of those songs. Well, thank you for listening. This is Silvio Canto in Dallas, and as I say, we'll keep an eye on events in Iran. I have a feeling that something big is going to happen, so we'll keep watching the news. Thank you, and we'll talk to you later. Have a good weekend, or the rest of it, I should say, and we'll talk to you